all is quiet. Or is it? The North American house hippo is found throughout Canada.
After myself and Harold and the whole gang up here at the lodge, keep your stick on the ice.
Hi! We're Bare Naked Ladies, and we're a little too cheap to make our own video, so here you go. 1, 2, 3, go!
And that's the kind of day it's been this Wednesday, August 31st. I'm Lloyd Robertson. For all of us here in the National Newsroom, good night.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans, United States and Newfoundland.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to, I think this is episode 5 of Canadians Talking About Canadian Music. I am joined by the esteemed panel of my fellow countrymen scattered across this country and around the world. Joining me, Peter from Music is a Journey, Glenn Calloway from The New Basement, Racer Joe, Curtis from Young LP Lovers, Darryl, Northern Vinyl Guy, and from The Big Smoke, Brian, the Neurotic Robot. Welcome, gentlemen. We discussed earlier that we were going to sort of chat about some Canadian music we like from this century. Because, I think Canadian music is thought of more in terms of, there's some amazing stuff in the 60s and the 70s. And you think like, Rush and Gordon Lightfoot, all of that stuff, and maybe we don't talk enough about Canadian music that's been made in the last 24 years. So that's kind of where we're gonna talk about tonight. Other than that, there's no parameters, no constraints, whatever the heck you want to show. Enlighten us about it. I would like to go first. Normally I go last, but I'm going to go first today because I have what I think is the perfect record to kick off this topic. So
we should put a quick over under on the same number of albums that we all have. I say 4. I say there will be 4 times where one of us will show something and one of
someone else will have it. Yeah. Fair enough.
All right. I think over 4.
Maybe.
How many do you think? I was wondering how many do you think you'll never go ahead.
I don't think anyone's going to have any, and I don't have any Blue Rodeo in my pile, so screw you. Noah's probably going to pick some of the weird crap I've got, but I just picked this up a couple weeks ago, and I showed in one of my other videos. But I am obsessed with this record by the Trans Canada Highway.
Oh, yeah.
Which
I want that.
I'm going to make myself stand out here a little bit. So this, for all intents and purposes, is a Canadian supergroup. This album came out 2023, and it's comprised of Stephen Page, formerly of the Bare Naked Ladies, Chris Murphy from Sloan, Craig Northey from The Odds, and Mo Berg from The Pursuit of Happiness. All very successful bands, Canadian bands, dating back to, late 80s, some of them started. So this is an album that these guys got together and they toured across Canada and they all played their respective hits. This is the only album they put out. And it's called Explosive Hits Volume 1. And it's designed to look like one of those cheesy K-Tel records. But what they've done is they have covered, AM radio hits from, Canadian radio hits from like the 70s. So you've got stuff on here like the Guess Who and the Stampeders and, lots of stuff you'd hear on mainstream radio in the 70s. And even 80s, I guess. This is just so bloody good. I wish that they would put out a studio album, but I don't know if this is going to be kind of a one-off or not. But if we're talking about Canadian music from this century, I mean, these are old songs, but this is a current group, and this is an album from very recently. So I know, Glenn, you have this, don't you?
I have it on CD. Yeah, it's a fun listen.
It is a fun listen, yeah. The only original on there is the first song, which is the theme from the Trans-Canada Highwaymen, which Stephen Page wrote. And it's kind of a fun, as Stephen Page often is. So
they've got a great trailer on YouTube for that video. It's a pretty long one, like maybe 14 minutes, but they do it like one of those old 70s commercials where
like an infomercial.
Fake lines.
Yeah.
I tried to order the CD, but it was sold out.
If you can find it anywhere, it's absolutely worth it. I mean, the songs are fairly true to the originals, but it's a very, very entertaining listen. So we'll just kind of go the order that everyone is on my screen here. So Peter, do you want to go next?
All right. Okay. So honestly, I actually didn't know what we were going to talk about until last night, and I already prepared a selection. So I quickly shuffled around. But I do want to mention this group because they just came in through my door. And a bit of a background story. My dad used to have an insurance office in a small office building in Surrey, British Columbia. And on the first floor, there was a record store called Reminiscing Records. And it was run by a guy who was at that time probably in his late 50s and his wife. But they had a daughter. And she was a real goth-looking type girl. She worked in there. She was probably in her 20s that time. And then there was this guy with long hair and a bit of a pot belly and stubble who was in there sometimes. And I found out that...
Was it Glenn?
Glenn had long hair?
Maybe 30 years ago. 40 years ago.
So as I found out, these two were members of a band called No Fun, which of course got their name from the Stooges song. And the guy, his name is Dave. He had a basement studio where he would do recordings. His band, it was him and the young lady. Her name was Pico, her stage name, and another guy on guitar. And they did these basement recordings. Kind of started out as a punk band, but moved into like a quasi folk rock duo with Pico coming in sometimes on vocals. So I was thinking about them the other day, wondering whatever happened to them, looked them up on Bandcamp and found that most of their stuff is available on CD now. So I ordered a compilation that is called The Beatles of Surrey, which is hilarious if you know anything about Surrey. It just says of Surrey on here, but this is a 2 CD set. As well, there was a second one called No Fun Must Pass, which was a 3 CD set. And this is just a whole, I don't know, which one am I holding up here? There we go. This is just a whole collection of their stuff from, there we go, from the 80s, the 90s, and even some more recent stuff. So the guy, Dave, he's still active. He's got a band now called the No Fun Gang, which is about 5 people. But yeah, it's really quirky stuff. Like this one album that I was holding up that has Gorgo on it. So many songs have the word Gorgo in the title. Gorgo Haze, Gorgo with Myself, Gorgo Brain. I don't know. It's pretty silly, funny stuff. But yeah, considering that I used to know them and I actually heard some of their songs when I visited the store, sometimes the Pico, Penny was her real name, she would play a song or two for me. And they had one called Let's Go to Surrey Today. And if you know anything about Surrey, British Columbia, it's probably not a place you ever wanted to go.
Been there many times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up there, right? So I know all the good points. But, you know, it was a Hells Angels base in the 70s. It spent the 80s with, you know, lots of druggy type people hanging around. There were like police busts. House maybe about 200 meters from mine across the road, they got busted for weapons and drugs one time by the police. And now apparently there are a lot of like immigrant gangs there selling drugs. There are shootings and so on. So doesn't sound so nice, but
lovely place.
I grew up there and it was okay for me. So anyway, that's No Fun. Still chugging, still playing away, but their history goes back to the mid 70s. And most of these recordings are from the 80s and 90s.
That's pretty cool.
Very good.
Cool.
Very good.
Cool stuff.
Glenn,
right.
You want to go next?
Okay, I pulled this CD I'm going to show. Came out in 2022, but it's an old concert. And the reason I wanted to show it first is because I don't know if any of you guys have been watching, but I've been watching the Tragically Hip documentary on Amazon Prime. One of the greatest documentaries I've ever watched. I can't believe how well this is done. It's so good. If anybody hasn't seen it, watch it. I don't care if you like Tragically Hip or don't watch the Tragically Hip. The human story involved in the whole thing, it's just absolutely fabulous. And I was trying to figure out how to get the Hip in because I didn't really like their later albums, but in 2022 they released Live at the Roxy, which is a show from the Roxy from 1991, which is a great live performance from the band, one of their historic performances. But yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Hip and to that documentary. It's absolutely fabulous. So that's my first.
Yeah, Glenn, I had the Hip on the #1 spot on my list as well, man. And because of the same reason, I was blown away with the documentary. I thought it was fantastic, and it showed the band in a light that I had never seen them in. You know what I mean? And yeah, it was just really good. I cried in the last episode. I'm gonna put full cards on the table, man. It really hit home. It was really good. I really
and especially they really focused on Canada, like even like people like Tom Wilson and Sarah Harmer and Dan Aykroyd not do a lot of talking in it and giving their thoughts, and they talk a lot about the songs that were about Canada and Canadian culture, and just an awesome document.
Yeah, I didn't know what a lot of their lyrical content was about. So I was learning more about the content of their songs as I was watching the documentary, and it was really, it was great. Loved it.
Probably the band that most sort of, is representative of our national identity, I guess, would be those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Sadly, I'm not a fan.
You should watch the documentary though.
I've started to.
Wow.
I did. Yeah. I kind of made him, or I guess I challenged him to at least watch one episode on our Wednesday night show. And you've started, have you?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Good. Because I reiterate everything that you guys just said. It's fantastic. And even down to the crying part a little bit, sitting there at 2:00 in the morning, because I just didn't want to stop watching, and I just watched all the way to the end. It's very good. Fan or no fan, again, I don't need to reiterate, but you guys put it succinctly that it's a very, very well done documentary about a great Canadian band. So
Joe said if I didn't watch it, he was going to whip me with some Saskatchewan wheat. So
that's right. Yeah.
But I said, yes, Wheat King. Yes, Wheat King.
That actually sounds kind of sexy.
Not in that kind of way, but leave it to you to go there. So, all right, Joe, you want to go next since you're the next one on my screen here?
Sure. Let's go right back to Kingston, but another younger band out of Kingston, and that is the Glorious Sons. And you guys have heard me talk about them before. Not necessarily ad nauseum. I don't think I've brought them up that much, but definitely one of my current favorites, making great new music. And I listen to some. I'm a little older, and probably 80% of the time it's pre-2000, but I do venture into the 2000s and beyond a little bit. But I really venture into it with these guys, and not to compare them in any way, because I don't think they probably want to be, other than the fact they're from Kingston and they're fantastic live and they have really good songwriting. You can't compare them to the Tragically Hip at all, but it's just really good. And this is their second album. They've got 4 out, and I think they've got a live that I guess counts as well that I don't have, but I've seen them 4 times now. They never fail to impress. They're one of those bands. And this is going to sound really ridiculous for the amount of live shows I've seen. I never saw the Tragically Hip, and I don't know why. I just never did. And we'll leave it at that. But this is a band I'm never going to miss when they come through, because start to finish live, start to finish on the albums, They're just solid albums. They're not making singles. They're making albums. And that's what I really like about them as well. Really good albums, but they're making albums from start to finish. They're just great stuff. So there you go. That's mine. The Glorious Sons out of Kingston, Ontario. Something in the water in that place, because there's also the Headstones as well come out of there. So
and not to mention your favorite Canadian musician, Joe, Bryan Adams.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, but I leave that to you to mention because of your love affair with him. I don't want to impede in that in any way.
You talk about him so much. I hate to bring him up. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Curtis, I know Glenn stole your first round pick, but you got something else?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'll jump in with the second choice here. Okay, so I've played with these guys before on my channel, and they go by the name of Slow Coaster, but they have a side project that they do. At least the bassist and the main vocalist and rhythm guitar player, where they have a fiddle player join them, and they go by the name of Holler. Yeah, and they've just released the one album so far, and I want to say it was maybe right around COVID. I think it would have been maybe just before. So we got Steve McDougall on vocals and guitar, Mike Levine on bass and vocals and acoustic guitar, and then Mike LeLeviere. Sorry, Mike LeLeviere. I'm sorry. And then Colin Grant picking up the fiddle on this one. And yeah, it's just some really kind of, I think the songwriting comes out on Holler a lot more than it does maybe on some of their Slow Coaster stuff. It's got a bit of a Celtic vibe to it, but just really, really nice storytelling. Wind that shakes the barley. It's not getting whipped with wheat, but I mean, it's a lot of lines here. What's the one? The Widow's Vow. It's a great little story of a shipwreck and coming to shore and whatnot. It's a little bit haunting, kind of with the fiddle, haunting fiddle sound. So, great local group here with some Celtic influenced folk rock, I guess.
That's right up my alley. I wrote it down. Cool. I want to check that out.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Check them out.
Right up my alley.
Those two, the Wind That Shakes the Barley and the Widow's Vow, are my two favorite on here. But the others are good too.
Okay. They should be probably like have a Bandcamp store or something.
They do. Yeah. Bandcamp is your place to go.
Perfect. All right, Darryl, you're up.
Yeah. So I'm just going to start this off by saying I actually don't really have a lot of vinyl in my collection post 95, I would say. Just I've started off with some of the earlier stuff that I remember from when I was a kid and whatnot. So some of the albums that I'm going to show are kind of a placeholder for musicians and bands that still do perform today. So they're not exactly 100%. But the first one I'm going to show isn't one of them. This actually is a 2019 release. When I was growing up, I remember I always wanted to see these guys in concert out of Newmarket. I didn't even think they were a thing up until a couple of years ago. I always thought that the lead singer had totally blown out his vocals due to medical reasons. But it turns out that Alan Frew and Company, Glass Tiger, released an EP in 2019 called 33. I just appreciate this album. I wouldn't say that it's what they were in the 80s and early 90s. This is an autographed copy that I bought right off their website. But I think it's about as close as you're going to get to their 80s stuff in the 2000s. I don't know what it is about Glass Tiger. I've always liked the band. I think that this is a pretty decent pressing, kind of cool on the red vinyl and whatnot.
Oh,
and
nice.
at the same time, when I was on the website, I also didn't realize, show this one too, but they released a Christmas album as well called Songs for a Winter's Night, roughly around the same time. And mine's on a green vinyl. So I really like Glass Tiger. Like I said, just due to my location and whatnot, I wish I could have got to see them and get to see them, but I don't think it's ever going to happen. But yeah, I know that for the youth today, like if I were to ask my students at school, who's Glass Tiger, they'd have no clue. But I think for us, I mean, if you haven't heard the 33 EP, check it out. I mean, it's not the same as their 80s stuff, but it does have, I think, some significance considering that, Alan was really sick for a while there.
Hey, Darryl, I was just curious, does that Christmas album cover, it says Songs for Winter's Night, is that they cover the Lightfoot Song for a Winter's Night on there?
I think so. I think most of it is original.
One of my favorites here.
Yeah, no, it is. Yes. It is the Gordon Lightfoot one. Yeah.
Awesome.
I was wondering the same thing.
And on side 2, they actually do a French one with Rock Voisin on it too.
Oh, so that's a name from the past. My wife should be watching that. She was a fan.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, despite your location, they are still touring. They're coming in a couple months. They were just here a couple months ago, and they're coming again. So you might get a shot still. They're out there. They're still playing. I'm not sure how many of them are, but Alan's one of them for sure. So
there's an airport near your town, Darryl. You can get on like a little bush plane or whatever, and fly to Timmins, and then fly to Sudbury, and then fly to Thunder Bay.
You wouldn't believe how much a one-way flight to Timmins is from here. It's insane, man.
I can't.
If you don't get a seat sale, it's like for a 45-minute flight, it's like almost $800.
Wow,
it's just insane.
You could go to Mexico for that price.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever said this, Darryl, but have you ever considered maybe you live a little too remotely?
Just a little bit.
Jesus. For anyone that's watching that, Americans or whatever, getting back to the Glass Tiger thing, they were huge in the 80s. Like they were sort of stereotypical of that, called that 80s sound. And I don't think they ever did a damn thing in the States. I don't think. I mean, they've been brought up in one other conversation I was in, and the Americans were like, never even heard of them before. Which surprises
and the ones that have heard of them, like Vinyl Sean commented on a post of mine one time. Apparently it's really hard for them to find vinyl of Glass Tiger in the States. You can find it anywhere in Canada, just everywhere.
Yeah.
I know Joe really likes "Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone" because Brian Adams sings background vocals on
that. Couple of lines that Brian Adams sings. Yeah.
I got the 45 in there. I got the 45.
The Rod Stewart in my town is probably my favorite.
Okay. Where are we here? Brian's the last one left, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
That's for last.
Speaking of, since Kingston came up, just advance warning that the second thing I'll show later is a band from Kingston that no one's mentioned yet, but that's just a little teaser. But I thought I'd start with this band called Viet Cong. And I'm not sure who knows about this band, but they're from Calgary, originally formed in 2012 out of the remnants of some other bands. And I guess you'd nominally call them post-punk, although there's a bit of psychedelia, noise, for example. There's lots of fuzzy guitars and cool drumming. Now, unfortunately, they were, or fortunately, I'm not sure how to approach that. They were compelled to change their name. And maybe you'll get a better sense of it if I show you their debut EP, which has this image on it. And it was seen to be kind of racist and maybe cultural appropriation. So they were forced to change their name. But before we get to that, they're a really cool band. The album sounds amazing, if you ask me. It's once I heard someone describe it as either psych rock or lo-fi art rock. Both are kind of interesting. There's only 7 tracks on here, and they're quite lengthy. So the last track, called Death, is over 11 minutes. If you're interested, I will. It's just on white. This is a white vinyl. So there are that sort of psych, noisy, lo-fi sound. But there's also a bit of, I think you would also say there's a bit of new wave in there somehow, if you can believe it. So the debut is probably a little darker and noisier. But unfortunately, or fortunately, they changed their name to Preoccupation. So they have this weird distinction of having had 2 self-titled albums. So self-titled Viet Cong and then self-titled Preoccupations, if you can believe it. And I'd say this is almost as good as the debut from Viet Cong, the debut record. Again, it has really lengthy tracks. There's 9 on here, but one of them is 11 minutes long. This particular one comes with that bonus 45. This is on clear vinyl. So it's an interesting band. I actually quite like them, and I don't think they get a lot of attention. They're on the sort of college university circuit, I guess, for a while, and I'm not really sure how well they're known, but I actually think they're really, really great. Maybe sort of some sort of nervous energy in the music. I just really think that they're both kind of, on the whole, you'd probably say dark, but kind of like really forceful. They don't really let up. Although there are a couple of mellower songs, but they just sort of have this kind of energy to them, which I really appreciate. So I don't know. Has anybody heard of them? I'm just curious. I don't know.
No, I just wrote it down, Brian. I'm interested.
Yeah. Okay. And under the title Preoccupations, I think they've released 3 full lengths under that title. And this the 2 things on the former name. But I find them quite interesting.
Cool. This is the best thing about doing this, guys, is you got to sit with a pad and a piece of paper. And you learn so much. It's awesome.
I also have to have a pad of paper so I know what order everybody went in. So to that end, we're going back to the top of the list, which is me. So I'll make myself big here again. Okay. This album I am crazy excited about. A band formerly of Oshawa, Ontario, but now of Guelph and Hamilton. A band that I absolutely love, Cuff the Duke. I saw these guys a bazillion times. They put out their first album, and I think this is their 6th album, I think. They put out their first album in like 2005, 6, something like that. And they went strong up to 2012. And then they did nothing for 12 years. And this just came out like 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
And I love these guys. They are, I guess, the closest approximation I could say for anyone as a frame of reference. They're sort of alt country in the vein of like Uncle Tupelo. I think would probably be a fair way to put it. Wayne Petty, who's the singer and the songwriter, has a very intriguing voice. It's good. It's just, it's a little, it's different. But yeah, they didn't break up. They just all went off and did other projects. And they played maybe 3 shows in the last 12 years. And then like 2 months ago, they started teasing on social media, and then they announced this album. So I ordered it. It's signed. It's on blue vinyl. And it's really good. The interesting thing is they've always sort of maintained the Cuff the Duke sound, but incrementally with each album, it gets a little bit more sophisticated, if that makes any sense. But you could still tell that the first album from almost 20 years ago shares a lineage to this. So I like it because, it's evolved, but it's the ingredients are still the same, if that makes any sense. But it's a great electric alt country kind of thing. Yeah, Cuff the Duke. This is called Breaking Dawn. So hot off the presses. I never thought that they would put out another album. I know Wayne, the lead singer. I know AJ, the drummer, and I see them occasionally. And I knew that there was an album that had, was 3/4 finished out in the ether. And Wayne's like, I don't know if we're ever going to get it together. And they finally did, whether it was a scheduling thing or whatever. So now they're going to tour. I'm going to go see them in December. They're coming to my town. So very thrilled after, it's kind of like when the Eagles took a break for 15 years. Well, these guys took a break for 12. So pretty thrilled about that.
Great.
Peter.
Yeah.
You're next.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to mention a band. It's an Ontario band. Where am I here? There we go. I don't know if anyone's heard of this one. It's a band called Freeways. They've actually just released a new album like a few weeks ago. This is their debut album called True Bearings. It's from 2020. They've also released, I think, 2 EPs, meaning 2 or 3 songs. And they are What would you say? So the sound is very much like late 70s or early 80s melodic hard rock. They sometimes describe themselves as sounding a bit like a new wave of British heavy metal, but there's nothing here that is really heavy like heavy metal. It is a guitar rock band with lots of strong melodies, clean vocals. Just if you like, I don't know, things like April Wine or Coney Hatch or Santers or any of those late 70s, early 80s hard rock bands from Canada that featured a lot of melody in their songs, that's what Freeways are like. The only thing is that the latest album so far appears to be a download only. I do want a physical copy if possible. But at least, you can check them out on Bandcamp. And I think they have a couple of videos out on YouTube as well. So check them out. Kind of thing is your interest.
I'm just looking at them now because I knew an unsigned band called Freeways about 15 years ago, but it's I wondered if it was the same guys, but I don't think it is. So
yeah,
I knew them personally. They were from Southern Ontario, as these guys are, but I don't know the names of the guys that are in the. Who does have the names of the guys in the band?
Oh yeah, probably I can find it. Let's see. We've got Dominic Innocente, I guess. Amar Amrith, Sebastian Alcamo, and Jacob Montgomery.
Yeah, it's not the same Freeways that I knew from several years ago.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds kind of cool.
Yeah.
Glenn.
Okay, I want to talk about a band. I don't know if you guys have heard of these guys from Saskatchewan. I just discovered them last year, and they've been around for about, I'd say, 8 to 10 years, and they just put out a new album this year, which I bought. And their band's called The Dead South.
Oh, so good.
Album is called Sugar and Joy. These guys are freaking incredible.
Yes, sir.
They play acoustic instruments, like basically a bluegrass setup. They've got guitar and banjo and mandolin, and but the music is not bluegrass music. There's a mix of like real rootsy. Some of it's like Tex-Mex feel to it. They're really original. This album is freaking fantastic. You guys should check this one out, Sugar and Joy. I haven't picked up any of their other albums yet, but I'm certainly going to. But these guys, this is 2024 release and one of my albums of the year. So it's a great record. Dead South.
Out of Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, actually.
Yeah, you're aware of them?
Have you been there, Joe?
Yeah, going to see them in a couple of months. My daughter is good friends with a couple of them. So yeah, very familiar with and really good stuff. And again, you aptly described them. Very little recognition, even locally, and I'm not sure. That's not fair. Not as much recognition, I guess.
Well, they're playing Maskey Hall, so that's not bad.
Yeah, but certainly are popular wherever they do go. They always come back around Christmas time because they all come back home for Christmas and that. So yeah, I think it's the end of November that we're going to see them. So really looking forward to it. Always a good show. Again, always good music as well. If you're into it, you're into it, I guess, for lack of the proper term. So very good stuff. Yeah.
Oh, I'm loving it.
Yeah.
I found out about those guys because they're signed. I don't know if they still are, but they were signed to 6 Shooter Records, which is an indie label in Toronto. Who I've got albums by a dozen artists off that. One of the greatest indie labels in Canada. That's how I found out about those guys. They're really good.
Yep.
Really good. Well, that's a great segue. Regina. Now it's Joe's turn.
No, it's Curtis's turn. But okay, I'll go. I thought it was Curtis's turn, but it doesn't matter.
I got the list here.
Oh, do you? Oh, right. All right. So I'm going to show you where it all started and then where it all began, or where it is currently. And this is where it all started, was Big Wreck back however long ago. I think 2001. Nope, 96. So I'm a little off, but anyway. And then this is where it's going, which is the most current Big Wreck. Ian Thornley, there was some Thornley in there when he was out by himself and doing some stuff. And for those that aren't familiar, I think you guys probably all are familiar with. I always feel like I'm very shallow compared to the rest of you guys. You always show a lot more independent stuff and obscure stuff and hey, discover this stuff. I kind of tend to lean towards the hey, I mean, a lot of people have probably heard of Big Wreck, but good stuff, just great guitar rock. And I know I always refer to seeing the bands that I talk about, and I have seen these guys a number of times. And Ian's a very, very good guitar player. Wouldn't call him underrated, but he's definitely not a name that comes up as far as a guitar player goes. But if you go and see him live, you will get a lot of guitar playing in there. But fantastic starting, fantastic most recent, and then there's a whole bunch of good stuff in the middle. So there's another good Canadian band with, I think, a couple of American players in it, maybe, if I am not wrong on that. But Canadian in my eyes, anyway. Kind of like the band. Yeah, there was one American, but everybody else was Canadian, so they're Canadian band.
That works. We're not going to argue with that.
I know you guys aren't going to argue with that, so that's
right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good pick. That's a good pick. Curtis.
All right, I'm going to stick out here on the East Coast. An absolute staple of the sort of Halifax alt rock scene. Probably got their start in the late 90s, I suppose. And that I actually don't have my favorite album by this artist, which is a shame, which would be Ashtray Rock. And that is Joel Plaskett and Joel Plaskett Emergency. There goes, there you are. Rob knows what I'm talking about here. I think born in Lunenburg, I believe. His father was a musician. So Lunenburg, home of the Blue Nose. All our Canadians don't know the Blue Nose. Any of our Americans.
And Americans are going, what the hell's the Blue Nose? It's a boat. It's a boat, people. It's on the back of our dime.
Yeah.
So he came from a musical family, and he's done with the Joel Plaskett Emergency, and then he's done a lot of solo stuff as well. This one, what's the name of this one? Scrappy Happiness. Kind of an interesting release. They released these as they recorded. Every week they recorded another song and released it, I guess, on iTunes or what have you. Kind of an odd rollout for this one. My favorite track on here is the Harbor Boys and the Island Girls. Nice track there. So Joel Plaskett, East Coast rocker.
It's not my turn, but since I'm the host, I'm gonna jump in.
Jump in, man. Yes.
I have the power, and I'm wild in power. Since you brought up Joel Plaskett, I'm going to bring up this truthfully
with the emergency.
The Joel Plaskett Emergency. Truthfully. This was what? This came out 90s, I think, or early 2000s. When did this come out? Do you remember?
I would say probably early 2000s.
Just 2003. I knew I picked it for a reason. Yeah, great. I love everything that Joel Plaskett does. He's also gone on to produce a whole bunch of people. Like he produced one of Alan Doyle's last records that it was just Alan and Kendall and Corey, and then Joel played on it. But this had, I guess, this probably had his biggest hit, right? Which was Come On Teacher, I think was probably his big hit, I think.
Yeah, I think Can I Go Nowhere? Can I Go Nowhere?
Oh, Can I Go Nowhere with You or something? Yeah,
that's a pretty big one. At least locally, it is anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's big here. I mean, there are people that know him, but I'm a nerd, so I know him. But yeah, great rock vibe. That's all it is. Good pick, man. Good pick. Which brings us, because even though I butted in line, Ryan, you're up. No, Darryl's next.
Oh, Darryl, that's right.
Darryl. See, I have a list.
Am I next?
I have a list, and I still fucked it up. God damn.
All right. So my next one, I'm going to use this album as just a placeholder, but at least in the beginning of the 2000s, she was completely relevant. I mean, her big claim to fame is in the 90s, but she was still making music, and she's still making music today. And I've got nothing wrong with Alanis Morissette. I was just looking it up. I didn't realize that she was still full blown. I mean, I guess if you look at her early 2000s stuff as she was still doing like Thank You and Hands Clean and all that kind of stuff. And then obviously she did that Juno host there, and I think it was 2004, whatever, right after the whole Janet Jackson thing, and did her protest. I mean, that's her way of being relevant, probably in the same context, I guess, of Nelly Furtado, just a bit of a different style. But I mean, even her music today, even though it's not, as stellar as it once was, I think it definitely got a good place. I've always liked Alanis Morissette, and this Jagged Little Pill album. I've mentioned this before on some of my videos that my staff, we always do a Secret Santa, and there was one Secret Santa that I had that for 5 straight days I got a vinyl record each day, and that was one of the ones I got.
Wow!
So
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, I can't go wrong with that. But I really like Alanis Morissette. I wish that she would come back out on top again, but once again, with a lot of the music that's going on today, I just don't think she's gonna top out that whole. I don't even know what the genres are today. I don't pay too much attention to it. But
well, I think it would be pretty hard. I mean, that's one of the biggest selling female albums of all time. Forget Canadian, but like in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like asking the Beach Boys to top Pet Sounds, right? Like, I mean, how do you do that? I think
I remember my first few years of university. I mean, she was just all over the radio.
Oh, yeah.
And my next couple of picks that I'm going to be bringing up are actually from where I was going to school, and they were just constantly being recycled on Canadian radio and stuff like that in southwestern Ontario. So I'll wait until I get to my next one, but yeah, it's just kind of funny that they just, like you said, I mean, it's like the Beach Boys or certain albums, they say the Beatles or whatever it is, you're just not going to top it. It would be really cool to see her come on top of the radio just one more time.
Yeah, and they don't have to top it, but they, there's it doesn't happen often, but there are still times where a band will be around forever, and their most recent album equates to things they did much earlier in their career, and it's not like it was material that they had and then all of a sudden produced it. But there are lots of bands that are still getting it done. Sometimes they just don't get the credit, and I've said it numerous times, but the perfect example is Green Day. That most recent album is just as good as Dookie. It's just timing and everything else, and it's done well for them. But that's a perfect example of, again, 40 years later now from Dookie. No, 30 years later. The songwriting, the performance, everything is still there. So it can happen. It's few and far between, but it can happen. Or it could be like Tool, where they do one every 20 friggin' years and they only put out 3 albums in 40 years.
Very fair. All right, Brian.
Actually, Green Day. I think they either were just here in Japan or they're coming. There were posters inside the trains advertising them. Yeah. They still look as cool as they ever did.
if you get a chance, go. Honest, it's very, very. I mean, if you're a fan, I always stipulate you got to be a fan a little bit, but even still, if you get a chance, you should go, Peter, for sure. It was very, very good concert. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
My buddy Blake, my best friend, he went and saw them in Toronto, and then he saw them in Buffalo, and then he saw them in Detroit.
Yeah.
Anything that was, I saw them. I don't know if they played like Cleveland or Pittsburgh. Went to one of those as well. Anywhere that was within like 5 hours, he went and saw them. So
yeah, wow. Yeah, I'll go see him again tomorrow for sure.
Yeah. All right, Brian.
All right. So because we mentioned Kingston, I've moved one up just for all the Kingston completists who might be watching. So this is a band called
We're going to be
P.S. I Love You.
Oh, yeah.
P.S. I Love You, Paperbag Records. It's a drum and bass duo, really. Not drum and bass, drum and guitar duo. Paul Saulnier is the guitarist, singer, and then Benjamin Nelson on drums. From Kingston, I guess not a band that people think of when they think of Kingston, but I find it, I really like them. There's sort of a bit of a shoegaze in there. There's sort of some kind of feedback sound. I've heard them compared to people like Pavement, the Pixies, and maybe even Weezer in that kind of category. I'm not sure if that's exactly right, but really interesting. There's an interesting, this is a collection of EP of singles and stuff that came out. But the funny thing is they do a cover of Rush's Subdivisions, which is really interesting to hear.
Wow.
And there's a track here that I'd never heard before called Where's the Party? It's a Madonna song that I never heard. So I'd heard this, and then I realized much later that it was a Madonna song. So I had to go back and listen to Madonna's version. But I'm not going to show you them all, but I'll show you one more, because I think if you want to get a sample of what they sound like from this record called For Those Who Stay, the title track, For Those Who Stay, is a track maybe you could sample if you're looking for something, to see what they sound like. Really, I think they're underrated. I think their last record came out in 2014, so I'm not really sure if they're continuing, but I actually think they're quite good, and maybe didn't get the attention that they maybe should have had. But that's something you could say about so many bands that just sort of fall under the radar, never really get. How do you get publicity these days? So maybe they should have been more well known than they are. But anyway, another Kingston band.
I know them well. You mentioned Paper Bag Records. I got a ton of stuff here on the Paper Bag Records label. And in fact, they might be on the one Paper Bag Records compilation I have, because Paper Bag put out a compilation where all the artists on their roster contributed to covering David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust. And I think they're on that.
Oh, okay. I have that digitally. I haven't listened to it in a long time, but you could be right.
I got it on vinyl. They gave it to me for free.
I didn't even know it was on vinyl.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was in Kingston in 1977, and I'd like to think I put something in the water that remains still. So I'm going to take credit for all of the Kingston music. It was something in 77 when
it doesn't take turds that long to break down, Joe.
Well, I live 45 minutes from Kingston, so I'm there.
So there. So it's all Glenn and I's fault. There you go.
Right.
Man arrested by a river doing something illegal.
He was throwing Saskatchewan weed into the water.
Yeah, it must be it.
Yeah, that's it.
I think we got everyone on this. Go ahead.
Sorry, aren't Helix from Kingston?
No, they're from Kitchener.
Kitchener. Sorry. Alrighty.
Close.
Nobody else is from Kitchener, right?
Have I told you my Helix story?
I don't think so.
Oh, man. Helix is from... I'll keep this real quick.
Okay.
But again, because I'm the host, I can break the rules. And there are no rules. We're just a bunch of pals shooting the shit. They're from Kitchener. And my buddy Bob from Wilco, he had a guitar repair shop in Kitchener. I used to hang out with him at his shop quite often. Many a Friday afternoon, sitting there shooting the breeze. I was in there with him one day. I'm sitting behind the counter at one of the benches. He and I are just talking about whatever. And this guy comes in with this old amplifier that needs fixed. And they talk for a couple of minutes. And the guy leaves. And Bob says to me, he goes, "You don't know who that was, do you?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "It's Brian Vollmer from Helix." I go, "Fuck." I didn't know. I mean, I'm not a massive Helix. Like, I know Helix and I know some of the hits, but I mean, if I'd been paying attention, I just wasn't listening to the conversation, even though I was sitting 5 feet away. But I'm just like, well, I'm, not going to, stick my nose in. But I didn't expect Brian Vollmer to walk in the door. So
yeah, sure.
I wish I had known it was him and be like, "Hey, man, take a picture with whatever it is."
He did a signing at the local record store where I am in Surrey. Back when the Wild in the Streets album came out, he came to that record store to do a signing, and a lot of people lined up. So I got a photo of him. He actually picked my sister up, and I got a photo of them like that.
Oh, that's cool.
He was such a nice guy. I think it was the first rock star I ever met, and it was such a good impression I got from him. He was just so nice and friendly to everybody.
I met him and didn't even know it was him. Felt like an idiot afterwards. So. I don't feel like an idiot.
I have someone coming up. I have someone coming up from Kitchener, but I'll save it.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay. I guess my turn then, right? We're going back around?
Correct.
Okay. Ryan probably knows this band because they're from the great city of Toronto. An album I am obsessed with lately. Do you know these ladies, Brian? The Beaches?
Yes. Yep.
Man, these girls are phenomenal. This is like their third or fourth record, I think. Maybe something like that. 4 girls from Toronto. 2 of them are sisters. I hate to put this label on it. They make angry chick rock. I mean, that's what this record is. That said, it's phenomenal. Leandra, the guitar player, a wicked guitar player. They had a huge hit. This album's called Blame My Ex, and they've had a massive hit off of here with the song Blame Brett. They've toured all over the world last year, and they opened for the Rolling Stones. Like, I mean, this has been their breakout year, but they've been around for like 10 years, and they used to be called something else before they were the Beaches. I just don't remember what it was, but I hadn't discovered them until this record, and it is awesome rock, straight up rock. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it, but you know, if you like women playing, you know, fast-paced electric rock and roll, here you go, the Beaches.
Cool.
This is the Brett, actually. Is the
yes, from the Glorious Sons.
Brett from the Glorious Sons. I saw them open for the Glorious Sons, and very good, very, very good musicians, great stage presence, and just good stuff. And I haven't got that newest album, but I understand it to be very good, as you have said before. And yeah, just good stuff. Getting a little traction, I think, out there internationally. I think I saw them on, I don't know, some American music program. I don't know what the hell it was.
They've done all the talk shows recently, you know, Kimmel and, you know, all those guys. And then, you know,
maybe that was it. Kimmel.
I follow them on social media. And, you know, one week they're in Germany and the next week they're in Japan and the next week they're in who knows where. So just one of the best rock albums I've heard in a few years. So really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, good one.
Peter.
Hey. All right. That was you, right? Okay. So let's go to Joe, because we love Regina. It's a band here called, let's see if you can see this. There we go. Okay, lots of glare. But anyway, it's a band called In Darkness. Wearing the t-shirt.
Whoa.
T-shirt.
Yeah, they gave it to me. So In Darkness, their current band, they only have 2 albums out now, and it's been a few years since the last one, but they are like a very heavy 90s alternative rock sound with a bit of metal in there as well. So I found out about them back in 2020 because I was doing this big hunt for Canadian metal bands that I'd never heard of, and I found hundreds and hundreds. So I was able to order one of their albums, and then I got in touch with one of the members through Bandcamp, and then I ended up getting both albums, and they sent me the t-shirt. But anyway, a very cool band, and I know they actually watch my channel because occasionally they'll leave some comment on one of my videos. And I had one video where I held up both albums and I was wearing the t-shirt, and YouTube made that like the auto-generated, thumbnail. So I thought, okay, I'll go with that. And then they commented like, best thumbnail ever.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, like really heavy alternative rock, 90s style, but with a metal side as well, but not like really metal. But they're from Regina. They've got a webpage.
You know them, Joe?
I don't know them, but I will have to check them out. I don't know them personally, and I don't know them musically. So I'll see if I can get you some more swag maybe at some point.
Yeah, they've got one of their songs where it opens like boom, 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 and then the singer just goes rah for, I don't know, like 15 seconds or something.
Yeah. I'll give it a listen.
Maybe he's going, Rob! That's what I'm going to
go. Probably because he opened the door and it's really cold outside in Regina. I don't know.
Yeah, well, or Joe's running at his door with wheat. You never know.
That's it. It's actually run.
Yeah, Joe's going to whip him with some wheat.
It's that Joe guy again. Run!
I would like to state, though, there is no baby oil anywhere in this house in its entirety. None. Zero. Zippo.
Wow, this is taking a dark turn, speaking of In Darkness, so we'll just keep moving right along. I think it's Glenn's turn now.
Hey, I'm still here.
I was thinking of you today, Glenn. When I was at the record show, I saw that Lowest of the Low record that you show all of the time. Whatever the
Shakespeare in My Butt?
It's kind of brown and has the red title on it.
Yeah.
Shakespeare in my butt.
Yeah. So somebody had it, and I wanted to buy it, and they wanted $85 for it, and I went,
"Oh, for original."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can buy it. The reissue sounds just as good.
Yeah.
I have them both.
I thought about you, and I'm like, I would buy it, but not for $85.
I probably will get to the low pretty soon here, but that'll be next. I'm sticking with the roots thing. Anybody ever heard of a guy named Harry Manx?
Nope.
He is basically a blues musician from BC. A lot of these albums came out in the early 2000s, but he's still touring and stuff. He was a heavy blues guy. Like, I don't mean heavy in music wise, just heavy into the blues, more acoustic blues, slide guitar. Has a really nice voice, real pleasant voice. It's not growly at all. It's actually very cool. And anyway, he went over to India and studied studied music, and learned how to play an instrument called a Mohan Veena, which is like a guitar with 20 strings on it. I don't know if you can see that somehow.
Crazy.
So you see all the things on the neck there, all the other tuning picks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so it has a droney sound like a sitar, but he plays it with a slide bar and plays blues on it. Plus, he plays regular guitar too. But the guy's an amazing musician, great voice. This is my favorite album of his called 20 Strings and the Truth, where he does some great covers on here. He does the old classic Gershwin song, Summertime. He does Bob Marley's Waiting in Vain. He does Van Morrison's Crazy Love. Really, really good album. He teamed up with a guy that some of you might be familiar with, a great guitar player from Toronto, I think, Kevin Bright. If anybody's familiar with Kevin. They did an album called Jubilee together. And he's got a live album that was recorded at the Glen Gould Theatre in Toronto with some special guests and everything, but just an amazing talent, Harry Manx.
Sounds interesting.
Interesting.
I want to hear that.
I didn't bring my notepad, man.
You have to watch it back later.
Watch the video.
Watching this back later,
exactly. Joe.
Okay. I'm going rock and roll, I'm going female, and I'm going from Kitchener. And to fulfill all three of those things is one J.J. Wild. This is her first album. She's got an EP that is kind of online only, but she does have a brand new album called Vices out there. And just good rock and roll. She kind of leans into her sexuality a little bit sometimes. If you listen to some of the lyrics, and that's on herself and what she wants to do. And I follow her on social media, and she definitely doesn't mind, I think, playing into that. And it's a little creepy sometimes for an old guy, because she's a really, really good looking young lady. She's just a little young. That's the only problem. But regardless, I continue to follow along and pay attention. But again, I know I always relate, but I will again to seeing her live. She opened up for the Glorious Sons. They're the other band. They're the band lately in Canada that seem to be really picking up and bringing on these tours with them. Some really great bands. As we talked about the Beaches, the most recent time I saw them with was the Bluestones, who I don't have any of, and I should, because they are a fantastic two-piece band that just killed it live. But anyway, JJ and her band, very good band as well. A couple of years ago now, this is the first album, and it had, some airplay. It got some Canadian rock and roll airplay. And then again, her most recent is called Vices, and I'm just waiting to pick it up when they come to town live, because I want to get her to sign it and things like that. So very good. To compare her to anybody, I wouldn't say Pat Benatar, but I also wouldn't say Alana Miles. Maybe a little Stevie Nicks, but more rock and roll than Stevie can be sometimes. And that's not fair, because Stevie's pretty rock and roll. And in fact, she does do a duet of with her and Brett from the Glorious Sons of Stop Dragging My Heart Around, which is a really, really good version. It's very true to the original. They just both sound really good doing it. So it's a great song to begin with. And then they both do just a decent job of it. And I think it's on Vices, the new one as well. So JJ Wild out of Kitchener, Ontario, and her band as well. Worth a listen. And she doesn't stray too far from one song to the next. If you like some, you'll like most of it, I think.
So JJ Wild story. Kitchener, Ontario is like 8 minutes that way for me. I live in the next town over. And back during the pandemic when we were all on lockdown, she was doing some like performances in her house that she would post on the internet. And she there's a Facebook group for residents of the city that I live in, which shall remain nameless, but you can figure it out if you look at a map. And she would post those because she's in the adjoining city. She would post those house performances on our local community Facebook page for many weeks over the course of the pandemic. So I've seen a lot of her performances, just her by herself, and they were fantastic.
Yeah, she's kind of got a little bit of that old soul. Like she's got a song called Arizona, and her photographer friend, and I don't know if the whole band went down to Arizona, and they lived down there for a couple of weeks or 3 weeks. And so there's lots of pictures in like the old shady motels in Arizona, and just the geography and the looks of Arizona and that. And she just seems like she'd be someone that would like to go out in a car and go for a drive and do a road trip and write some songs about that road trip. I don't know if that's exactly what she's shooting for, but that's the perception. And I think it comes across in the songs as well. So it's good stuff. I like it.
Yeah. Very talented. Very talented.
Yeah.
Curtis.
All right. I'm going to go totally another direction here. And I'm going to go with a pop artist who was big. I think her first album went in 2000, actually. And that's the one I have here. But she just released an album last week, her 7th album. And I kind of forgotten about the artist, really. And I think my daughters are they're all tweens now. So they're listening to pop radio. And every time we get in the car, they want the pop station on. And so I'm getting a lot of pop music in my life right now. And I think it must have been through listening to the pop radio that I learned about her new album. And in the conversation, I learned she put out a Spanish language album, which kind of piqued my interest. My wife is from Latin America, and so we listen to a lot of Spanish language music as well. So I'm talking about every Canadian will know this, Nelly Furtado, massive pop artist here, Juno winner, and I think she hosted the last Junos just last year. I actually quite like the song that was off this one, Like a Bird. I'm Like a Bird, is it? Like a Bird?
Yeah.
I actually quite like that song. She has that other one that really, what was it called? Promiscuous or something with Timberland, is it? Produced it. But anyway, so I just went back and I checked out their Spanish language album. It wasn't bad. It won a Latin Grammy. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna check this out. Canadian artist winning a Latin Grammy. That's kind of interesting. And listened to her new album last week. And it's heavily produced, I would say. Maybe overproduced. But it's got some Latin rhythms and African drumming on there. It's a very eclectic pop album, and I was kind of surprised. So I'm going to give my shout out to Nelly Furtado on her new album. It's called 7.
Yeah, I was going to say it's called 7, right? Yeah,
that's right. I thought it was okay. It's not my normal speed, but there's a few tracks on there I quite liked. So.
She makes pop music interesting because she does bring in different elements of music from around the world into her music. A lot of times you hear,
and I wasn't expecting that. Right?
Makes it interesting.
I probably haven't listened to her since this. So I liked that she was bringing those eclectic sounds, and I thought it was very interesting.
Good,
awesome,
good. Darryl.
Yeah, so actually, I'm just going to kind of segue off of what Curtis was saying. Just it's a little bit different. From '98 to 2005, I actually lived in Windsor. I was going to school down there, And, you know, speaking of bands that include, I guess, more of a cultural feel, this is probably, at least to my understanding, probably the biggest band that's ever come out of Windsor, Ontario. I mean, incorporating Middle Eastern flair, I guess is what you would call it. Now, one of the biggest regrets I ever had after I moved up to Moosonee was this: too much. You'll get a good kick out of this if you see all these records here. But I actually got rid of all the jewel cases for every CD I ever owned. I kept the CDs in a binder, but I got rid of all the jewel cases because I said they were too heavy. But I still have the disc. So I'm going to talk about the Tea Party.
Tea Party, yeah, good band.
And they're still releasing music today. They've done a few EPs in recent years, and I mean, to me they're a fantastic band. You know, Glenn, you showed that instrument earlier. They've got that. I think it's like a double arm guitar, but it's more like a Middle Eastern type sound. And I mean, their albums, I think from '96 to 2001. I mean, they're all fantastic. And they just keep performing today. So I just have to recommend the Tea Party if our American friends haven't checked these guys out. I mean, go with the Tea Party. I know the Edges of Twilight is from 1997, 98, I think it is. But I mean, I know it's not 2000s, but that's the one that I would start with. It's a pretty good album.
They were an absolute staple of much music in the mid to late 90s. I mean, you couldn't watch much music for an hour and not see a Tea Party video.
Yeah.
They were.
Yeah.
All over.
And I kind of forgot about
incredible
that band.
that they're still releasing music today.
And just kind of haven't thought of them for years. That's
interesting. Well, didn't Jeff Martin move to Australia for a good part of a couple decades or something?
He's still living there.
Is he?
He's still living there, and he's doing like solo tours around Australia. But he was here, Canada recently, because they were touring in Canada recently. I know.
Yeah.
The band also released or re-released a couple of years back now, maybe 2 years ago. This was their original independent album that was released back in the early 90s. Wow. They only made like 500 copies originally. I think it was cassette, and they recently re-released it, and there's the original mastering and a second disc with the remastering. So if you want to hear the Tea Party sounding a lot like Led Zeppelin, this is the album to get.
Peter, did you feature them on your channel recently?
I've talked about them from time to time, and maybe a year or two years ago, I actually did a whole video about their history and all their releases, including Jeff Martin's solo material. Yeah. Oh, did we lose the captain?
We did, but that's okay. That's it.
Past the kids' bedtime.
Now we can skip.
Yeah. They are still touring quite a bit, actually, I think. And they're not. They haven't quite. I don't think that they've quite fallen into the summer festival category yet. Although I think they probably do get into those every once in a while. But they can still fill a venue. I don't know if they can fill as big of a venue as they used to, but they still do okay. So
sorry about that.
Is that we didn't say anything all over tonight, or is it just out here?
What's that?
Is it a holiday all over Canada, or is it just out here?
Just out there.
And I think just federal, really. Like my daughter, who works for the federal government, has the day off tomorrow. I have the day off tomorrow. Yeah.
What holiday?
I got the day off tomorrow.
Yeah. Glenn and I both have the day off tomorrow. Truth and Reconciliation is. Yeah.
I'm working.
The kids will be wearing orange shirts.
I got to do a walk.
I don't believe the truth. No, I'm kidding. It's all good. I shouldn't make that joke. That was culturally insensitive.
So schools are probably closed too.
No, they're open.
No, well, we got to go to school.
I'm glad to hear that, because I'd like to hope they'll spend the day talking to the kids about why this is an important day.
Schools are closed here. We got a holiday.
I think they did
a holiday.
I think they did that though, Glenn. I think they did that a little bit on Friday as well. I know that there was a couple of news stories where it certainly from when it first started, I think, which was what, 2 years ago now, I think was the first official Truth and Reconciliation. I think it's really come a lot more to the forefront, and the schools are talking about it, and there's more public awareness of it, I think, as well. So
as we should publicly aware our American friends that may watch this later on, Truth and Reconciliation Day is, how do I put this? Our attempt to acknowledge the European wrongdoings against the original native inhabitants of Canada. Would you say that's a fair assessment of Truth and Reconciliation Day?
Yeah, I think that is certainly. Yeah.
And to that end, I acknowledge that I am a resident of what was once the Huron Nation. So there you go.
We're
coming from you from Mi'kma'ki.
Yeah, we're Treaty 4 here in Regina, and then Treaty 5 Saskatoon, or 6, I can't remember. Anyway, yeah. So, but that's I think that's what you were talking about, Curtis. Was that right?
That's right. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I didn't know about that because I'm in another part of the world, but I'm glad to kind of hear about it because I remember it was 2 years ago there was that big discussion about those unmarked graves behind the residential schools and places, right? And around that time, I was doing a lot of research about mountains in Canada because I was talking about it with another Canadian. We were going to do a book together about mountains in Canada, but he had a baby and my family life got too busy and had to drop it. But at that time, I was doing a lot of research about these mountains that are all over the country. And I was looking into the native historical context of the area as well, because I wanted to cover geological, tourism, and as well as cultural and historical. And I found a lot of information that it didn't surprise me to find it, but it was still shocking to read about it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they're finally bringing it more to the forefront to say, at least, we have to recognize that's where our history went. And that is, it was a tragedy really for so many people and cultures and.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right.
I should have prepared some bands with native singers, but I didn't.
I have one. I don't know if I'm going to show it or not. Brian, your turn.
All right. So I think in the last episode I mentioned Godspeed You, Black Emperor, which is this godfathers of Canadian post-rock. And that band has sort of spawned numerous side projects, everybody from Silver Mount Zion Memorial Orchestra to Fou Thérèse, and there's too many to name, and it's out of my favorite record label called Constellation Records in Montreal, which is kind of like the nexus of post-rock in Canada, which, post-rock's that kind of style of music that focuses more on timbre and riffs than it does on conventional song structures. So I changed my headphones here. Anyway, so one of those bands that was a split off was this band called Fly Pan Am, who, and this is their record from 2021 called Frontera. I think this guy's name was Roger Tellier Craig, who was the member of Godspeed You, Black Emperor, who went to this band. They're very, very unique band because it's sort of, some people call post rock also parts of it as being post progressive, which is kind of interesting. But they are, experimental deconstructivist with krautrock influences. Part of it's really hypnotic. Their sound has changed a bit over the years. For example, if you go back to, doesn't really tell you much, but that record, the sound has sort of changed a little bit. This is something they did for a dance project. Now that might sound a little off-putting, but it's not what you'd expect. It is really krautrock, sort of use of noise. This is maybe has more synths and minimalism and dark ambient pieces than their earlier stuff. But really interesting music. This particular release comes with this insert about the actual event that they were doing. Really unique sound. Some people don't like the earlier stuff because it's really highly repetitive, which is something I always appreciate. I love super repetitive music, and that sort of qualifies. But this one's a little less of that, more of this sort of maybe minimalist sound and sort of a darker sound, which I think I just find the music really, really interesting. That once you find Godspeed You, Black Emperor, you end up going down all these roads to, Exhaust, Shalabi Effect, and all those kinds of bands, which I find very, very interesting. So that's Fly Pan Am. Not for everybody, but I think it's really, really, really good.
Cool.
Right on.
I am always impressed, Brian. You bring up the most obscure stuff. I love it.
Yep.
I am always incredibly shocked that you actually pull a record I've heard of. So
yeah, I was just wondering what the overlap is so far, but I don't know if maybe one.
No, I mean maybe not really much. All right, so we got enough time to squeeze one more sort of quick round in. So we got about 2 minutes each. So I will I'll go because it's my turn here. I'm going to show this record, which is an interesting album. This, Brian may have heard of this. This is an album called The Unintended. The Unintended are a supergroup is not, I mean, maybe, but not. So it's these fellas right here. And it is this dude here with the long hair is Rick White, who's a rock musician from, I think, out east Curtis's way, I think. And this guy here is Greg Keeler from Blue Rodeo.
Oh, cool.
And the other four guys are the Sadies from Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is an album that they put out in 2003. This is the remastered edition that came out in 2019. It's got some bonus stuff on it. Just a great, I don't really know how to describe it. So the Sadies are kind of, call them sort of cosmic cowboys, right? It's kind of like psychedelic country, maybe. Psychedelic country with some rock in there, but they can play anything. So it's kind of that kind of fused with some garage rock, maybe. Mm-hmm. I guess is kind of the best way to put it. But it's a rock record, but it's got a very indie feel to it, and it's so damn good. It was a one-off album. These guys have worked together many, many times. Greg Keeler has done a ton of stuff with the Sadies. The Sadies have done stuff with Blue Rodeo, which Greg is a member of. Rick White just put out, the Sadies just put out a new album. Travis, who is the one surviving brother, his other brother, Dallas, he died unexpectedly a year or two ago. So Rick White, the guy with the long hair, has stepped in to record the new Sadies album. And it's Sadies music with a little bit more of a garage rock feel to it. So I have that as well, actually. This is the new Rick White and the Sadies. So these guys have interwoven through each other's musical experiences for years, but this is the one and only time that they put out an album together. And there's actually a single that's out there in the world too that I don't have. That is it's a cover of I forget. It's a cover they did of some other famous Canadian song, but I don't have that. But this album, The Unintended from 2003, is just a great garage rock album.
Love all those guys.
Is that hard to find, Rob? That album?
No, not even. I mean, I would think the original, yes, impossible. Okay. But the reissues, I would imagine. I don't think it's that hard to find. I've seen it a few times.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen it a few times. Peter.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to mention a fellow who goes. Anyway, his name is Ed Bernard. And this album is Polydactyl. It goes back to, it was 2015. And Ed Bernard is from a band called, there you go, Drugfarben. So, Drugfarben, as far as I know, they've only ever put out 2 albums. That one I just showed is from 2014. They are, if they're still active, or at least were, a progressive rock band in the old school progressive style. A lot of influence from ELP, a lot of organ and a lot of guitar and longer pieces. Phil Narrow, who is actually American, but sang just as much in Canada as he did in the US, was the singer for the band. And Ed Bernard is the strings guy. So I'm saying that because, yes, he plays all the guitar, but where are we here? He actually plays a lot of different stringed instruments. And this album here is less of that ELP influence type progressive rock and more of a guitar, electric guitar, acoustic guitar, mandolin, and various other type things on here with some extended long pieces, like up to 20 minutes, as well as shorter tracks. He's a very talented musician. I don't know what he's been doing recently, but anyway, very, very cool stuff. A bit of country, a bit of folk, and a lot of progressive rock.
Cool. Wow, that looks really interesting. Cool. Man, I'm seeing some really cool stuff tonight. This is awesome.
I just checked that Unintended album. There's 5 or 6 copies on Discogs, and they're like $40. So,
yeah, I want that. No, I got 2. I want that one too.
It's your turn now, Glenn.
Okay. Well, Rob mentioned them. My favorite Canadian band, Lowest of the Low. I can't go without talking about them. I'm going to show their album from 2019. It's their second most current album, Agit Pop. It's called Ron Hawkins, the songwriter and singer and kind of leader of the band. He considers this their best album, even better than Shakespeare in My Butt. And it's really infectious. It's got a pop music feel to it, but still pretty rocky, and elements of ska and reggae and pop and everything all mixed together. They're a real mixed bag, but this is a great freaking record. Agit Pop, Lowest of the Low. And Rob, they're coming to Guelph pretty soon, I think.
I know, I saw that. There's a bunch of people coming because we have a new concert venue that's just opened up. So the Sadies are coming. They're coming. Cuff the Duke's coming. There's a bunch of people I want to go see.
Did you see the concert venue they're opening in Toronto?
Yeah, Downsview Park.
Downsview Park.
Yeah.
It's funny that theater.
It's funny that they announced that last week because Oasis is going to announce they're playing there at Downsview Park tomorrow.
Wow.
So, I don't know if I've ever asked you, Glenn, speaking of Lowest of the Low and Ron Hawkins, how do you feel about Ron's side project, the Do Good Assassins?
I love the new, the Rusty Nails and the Do Good Assassins and his own solo stuff. Yeah, he's just a major talent.
He is. Yeah. Kind of underrated, I think. Not a lot of folks
Very
know
underrated. Great songwriter.
Yeah, for sure. Joe.
Hold on.
Uh-oh. Call an ambulance.
Uh-oh.
Did anybody got a defibrillator?
Yeah, no kidding.
Somebody smack it with some wheat.
Okay, I think it's going to go away. Yeah, I think it's going to go away. All right.
That's what happens when you puff a doob between everybody else talking.
No, it's been a while. Not that I haven't in the past, but it's been a while. All right, I'm going local. Well, I'm going Saskatchewan anyway. Saskatchewan doing pretty well on the show tonight, which is kind of nice to see. But these guys, Rob, you know these guys, and I've talked about them before. But yeah, just good stuff. Rock and roll.
Look at that. Signed and everything.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Just send it to my house. I'll take care of
it. One Bad Son out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. This was actually their second album. I think the first one's getting reissued, though. I think I saw that somewhere, and that they're going to have that because there's also new music that's coming out. They keep teasing it, but it's actually supposed to be. A couple new members in the band. There's still the 2 originals, but to explain them, I don't know. Just rock and roll. It's rock and roll. It's songs about chicks and cars, and it's just good. Satellite Motel. If you're ever driving through Medicine Hat, Alberta, right when you get into town, if you're going west, look to the left. There is the Satellite Motel that the song is written about, and the old neon sign's still up there as well. But yeah, new material coming out, which I'm looking forward to. But another great band live, and just good Canadian rock and roll, kind of trying to keep that tradition going. There's lots out there, but they're trying to do what they can, represent the West, at least Saskatchewan anyway. So good stuff. One Bad Son out of Saskatchewan, Canada.
Awesome.
Hey. To put it into context, I think their early stuff, I love their self-titled album. I think that's their best. Yeah. And you hear like a song off of there. If you want to hear maybe the best song they ever did, they did a song called Retribution Blues, which is phenomenal. And I sort of get like an 80s GNR kind of feel to that.
Well, I was gonna say a little Aerosmithy as well, a little just the kind of the blues-ish aspect, especially, and not because it's got the word in it, but Retribution Blues, just that guitar off the beginning, that sounds like something that, you know, Joe Perry would have come up with in the late 70s, like back to early Aerosmith.
Yes.
So maybe a little bit of that, but just, yeah, bluesy guitar, rock and roll. And yeah, like I said, a couple new members in the band. So looking forward to, haven't seen them for a little bit, but they're supposed to, again, new music coming out. And then hopefully they'll do some touring and get out there and play live as well.
What's the first? The first album's not the self-titled one, is it?
Yeah, the first one's a self-titled, and then this Black Buffalo is actually is the second. And then I don't think there was anything else up until this new one. I think Black Buffalo was there's one more after that, I believe, as well. So
yes,
I could know for sure, but I think there's one more after Black Buffalo.
I can confirm that the self-titled will be coming out on vinyl because I know Kurt Dahl, the drummer, through a mutual acquaintance.
Right.
Kurt Dahl is a very famous entertainment lawyer in Canada, represents a lot of musicians. And my friend Blake is one of his clients, and they're working on a record deal at the moment. And so I sort of met Kurt quasi-virtually, I guess. And he was surprised that I had a promo copy, an advanced promo copy of the self-titled album. And I said, you guys have got to put this out on vinyl. He goes, you think people would buy it? I go, yeah, absolutely. So then the next time I was talking to him through my buddy, I asked Kurt, is it happening? And he goes, yeah, it's going to happen sometime, hopefully later this year, early next year. So.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, they lost their original bass player, and then it took them a little while. They found someone, then they went away again, and it's just been a bit of turmoil in the band lately. And I think they're both also busy with other stuff as well. But hopefully it's focused and it's back to make, which it is. I know they're making it. I just don't know.
The sound is going to be the same because they've got the same vocalist and it's the same drummer.
Yeah. It'll. I don't think they're going to stray too far. They've got a system and it's working for them, so I don't think it'll stray too far. And yeah, go and see them live though for sure. Great band live, very good band live.
Absolutely. All right, Curtis.
Can I ask? I just looked over at Amazon here in Japan. One Black Buffalo is available on CD. Reasonable price. Looks like it's used though, but is that a good one to get then?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's good. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like something I'd be into.
Yeah,
a lot of this stuff is, but yeah. Okay.
They do I love a good cover song, especially when it's mixed up a little bit. And their version of Psycho Killer is a very good version of Psycho Killer. Because it doesn't sound it sounds like Psycho Killer, but it's good. So yeah.
Agreed.
And it's on there.
All right, cool.
All right. Curtis.
All right. Excuse me. All right. We're gonna bring it back to the East Coast again. And I'm gonna highlight these guys, the Jimmy Swift Band. Much like Darryl was saying, I did away with many of my jewel cases as well, but I kept the inners in my booklets as well. But yeah, Jimmy Swift Band, they were together from the early 2000s, probably to about, 2012 maybe. They had about a 10-year run, I would say. Now defunct, although they did get together last year to do a show along with another now defunct group, Grand Theft Bus, a similar kind of ilk. They put on the two bands got back together and did a show at the Marquee in Halifax. They're I would say a rock jam band, kind of heavily electronic influenced, lots of keys, real groove heavy. They've got 4 studio albums and 2 live albums, staple of the kind of the festival around here. Seen them lots of times, probably a dozen times or so, I would say, in those years. Tracks like astronauts attempting to take off their spacesuits, followed by so that they may copulate. Sort of 8-10 minute tracks, kind of thing. Yeah, just real fun. Like I say, groove heavy, jammy, electronic influence kind of band. So if you're into that kind of thing at all, check out the Jimmy Swift Band.
I've heard the name.
Interesting. Never heard of them.
Lots of fun. We had lots of fun times with the band.
Did you talk about them before, Curtis?
I'm not sure I have, to be honest. Not sure. Nothing comes to mind, but
okay.
Wouldn't be surprised if they got a mention in my video. I don't think I've ever featured them or anything.
Yeah, the name sounds like I've heard it somewhere before. So, all right, on the list.
All right, Darryl, what do you got?
All right, so for my last one, I actually don't have any copies of this on CD, and they don't produce vinyl, but I wanted to go local with this one as well. So there is a band.
Polar Bears Grunting. That's about only thing local where you are.
there is a band that's from up here, but they've kind of relocated down south, right, for recording purposes and all that kind of stuff. So the lead singer is actually from Attawapiskat. There's the guitarist and the bassist are from Moose Factory, and the drummer is from a reserve in northern Manitoba.
Right.
And it's
how did
you would call it pop rock or just rock, and they call it a little bit of roots rock as well. But the name of the band is actually called Midnight Shine, and they're a pretty good band. You can buy their CDs off their website, but they actually do a cover of Neil Young's Heart of Gold, and you can stream it. I think it might be on Spotify and stuff like that, but they do have some singles, and I think I'm just gonna look it up here. I know that they were nominated for some stuff, but I guess the idea, they were nominated as the Indigenous Artist of the Year at the Junos in 2022. So they're a pretty decent band. The lead singer Adrian Sutherland has actually come to my high school and done some performances with the students at my school. So I think I guess for me, they're kind of a relevant band just because, I mean, they touch base on a lot of not just issues within Indigenous culture, but just issues in Canadian society in general. So they've got 3 CDs, I think, 2018, 2019, and I think maybe 2022. And they're all on their own label. I think it's called the Midnight Shine label, something like that. Anyway. But yeah, just like I said, I don't have anything in front of me because I pretty much stream it. But if you want to check out Midnight Shine, I mean, give it a listen. Kind of a roots rock type band, I suppose.
Right up my alley. I got it on my list.
Yeah. I remember you talked to them about them on one of your videos before, and I had them down on my list too. So now they're underscored twice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I mean, they're not going to be for everyone. But I mean, check them out and just see if you like them and support them, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Your part of the world comes up. That Attawapiskat made me remember. Your part of the world comes up in that Tragically Hip documentary a little bit. I think. Episode 3, I think, maybe 4. Yeah.
Well, actually, Gord Downey came up here. There's this family that has a camp that's just about, I guess, 40 miles south of here. It's off the tracks, and they invite high schools up from Southern Ontario and stuff like that. But the Tragically Hip, Gord Downey used to go there all the time before he died. He knew the family personally.
Wow. Yeah.
That's
crazy.
It brings up a trip that the band made there a while ago now. So
yeah.
All right, best for last. Brian.
Best for last. Well, I'll start. I'll go with something like it's a rock record. So rock band from Vancouver called Black Mountain, and this is Wilderness Heart. This is their 3rd record from 2010. So they're like a stoner rock, blues rock, indie rock, kind of psych rock band. And I love everything they've done. Their last one came out, I think, in 2019. I think they've been really consistently great. And let me just say that if you want to get a good example of what they sound like, the lead-off track on this album called The Hair Song. I mean, if you like that song, you're going to like everything they did. The vocals are sometimes shared between, I'm going to forget his name now, Amber. Her name is Amber Weber, Stephen McBean, I think. So really interesting. I think they're fantastic. I don't understand why. I mean, people know them, of course, but I think they should be more popular because I know this album cover. I don't understand that either, but really great band.
Cool,
Fantastic.
I like it.
Sharknado or something. But I recommend them. I think they're really good.
What's the name of the band again, Brian?
They're called Black Mountain.
Never even heard of them.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. I saw a list of stoner rock and stoner metal bands from Canada, and they were on that list. So I have that listed as bands to check out. So I will definitely go to check them out now.
Definitely.
I have to go to Amazon right now.
I used to be on a list of stoners in Canada.
Well, we are at the hour-and-a-half mark, so we'll wrap this up. This was fun, guys. Thank you for doing this with me every month, whenever we can. It's I love Canadian music, and I know you guys do too. And it's always great to learn about all the other stuff that's out there, because we all have sort of our wheelhouse that we're in, but there's such a rich musical
tapestry,
sure. That it just doesn't, you don't hear about it, right? We don't really have an avenue outside of the CBC, I guess, or the internet. It's not really a pipeline for Canadian music to get out there. So it's always great to chat about these things, and we learn about new things. So thank you, guys. So for those watching, please, I'm sure you know all these gentlemen, but if you don't, Brian and Embryonic Robot, Joe from Racer Records and On a Vinyl, Peter Music is a Journey, Curtis Young of P-Lovers, Darryl Northern Vinyl Guy, and Glenn Calloway from The Basement. Thank you, gentlemen. That was a pleasure, and let's do it again in a month's time. So thank you very much.
It'll be the All Anne Murray Appreciation Hour next time.
I'll be away that day.
Maybe next month we'll do before 2000s. We'll do the other half of the equation. So there you go.
Thanks, guys.
All right. See you, everybody.
Thanks, Rob.